Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today. We are excited to have you here as part of our PathLock Innovation Series. We will go through our presentation in just a moment. Our presentation right now is with Spear MC and Hackensack Meridian Health. It's how Hackensack Meridian Health used MFA to secure their PeopleSoft system. Our presenters will introduce themselves in just a moment.
Well, thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, PathLock, for inviting us. My name is Randy Johnson, and I will be the only presenter today. I am co-presenting with Gary Wilhelm from Hackensack Meridian Health. I am Randy Johnson from Spear MC, and together we helped to put the PathLock solution in at Hackensack Meridian Health to accomplish several goals that Hackensack Meridian Health had. Gary got a better offer. He's in Cancun, and I hope he's enjoying himself. The presentation you're about to see has actually been done a number of times. We did this for the first time in, I think it was Oracle Open World 2018, when we were talking about our plans, our grand plans of how we're going to migrate to Fluid and turn on mobile functionality. Let me give you a little background on Hackensack Meridian Health. They're a not-for-profit organization in New Jersey, very vertically integrated. They even have a teaching hospital. So we talk about in these bullet points the modules that they do have, the pillars, HCM and financials, but they actually also have campus solutions running in their organization. So they have 3 pillars of PeopleSoft running today. Back when we were originally looking at Fluid, at the time we were equating Fluid with mobile, and it turns out it's not really the case. You can use Fluid clearly in PeopleSoft without going all the way into a mobile deployment, but ultimately the goal at HMH was to enable mobile access, not just Fluid, but mobile access across the pillars. It led with open enrollment on HCM, the ability to do employee self-service, lookups, Fluid user interface across the board was the goal, with an extended goal of opening up portals for third parties, suppliers, and making the entire PeopleSoft system accessible well beyond the confines of the internal infrastructure network. The goal, again, for all members to be able to access PeopleSoft and do the things that they do in both HCM and financials. As you might imagine, Hackensack has also deployed the unified navigation so that a single entry point is enabled for all employees, whether they're accessing their financials information or their HCM information. Lastly, second to lastly, and really one of the biggest key drivers in mobile versus Fluid was the expenses module. The financials user community was relatively small. The HCM community obviously was every employee in the organization, but the desire to deploy mobile expenses on the phone was a key driver in flipping from just purely Fluid to mobile and phone access outside the firewall. And so that was the key driver here. We're continuing to move forward with several key initiatives. The supplier portal is enabled, strategic sourcing, lots of activity at Hackensack Meridian Health, all enabled through making external access possible. Okay, so Hackensack Meridian Health on the eastern side of New Jersey. They are considered the largest healthcare provider in the state. There are comparisons that you can make with other providers, but as far as the numbers of physicians and students and patients all combined, this is where Hackensack Meridian Health is, and they continue to grow. Okay, about my company, Spear MC, we are a PeopleSoft first organization. We have been since our founding 10 years ago. Many of us at Spear MC came from KPMG and other big 5 audit firms, implementation firms, and gravitated towards the Spear MC model. We offer many different types of services across healthcare, higher ed, financial services, public sector, industries that tended to gravitate towards a service-based platform that PeopleSoft thrives in. And we used to do training and implementation services as our core. We still do. That's critical to our business, but we've expanded well beyond that. Everything we have expanded to, though, still has its source in the PeopleSoft ecosystem. So any emerging technology, any cloud platform strategies that we have are based on our core competency, which is all things PeopleSoft. PeopleSoft HCM, PeopleSoft Financials, PeopleSoft Campus. All right. I probably have talked too much about Spear MC. You're not here to hear about us. So I'm going to move into the project and the approach. We'll tell a little bit of a story here. So we'll go through the journey. We'll talk about the problem, the solution, and we'll have a little peek at the ultimate solution. I mentioned a few slides earlier that HMH was looking to replace an antiquated expenses model. They were really focused on doing a PeopleSoft first push. So if PeopleSoft could handle a particular business process, then the objective was to deploy that functionality within a fully integrated solution. It was particularly enabled through unified navigation when all things PeopleSoft could be accessed through one centralized portal. At Hackensack Meridian Health, that's called My Way. When we were looking at the existing expenses tool that was being used, there was some mobile functionality, but it was relatively difficult to integrate and difficult to maintain. So users wanted to be modern, but they didn't want to deploy a non-fluid solution. PeopleSoft Expenses has been around a long time. The classic version was out there. That was not the option that was going to be implemented at HMH. Furthermore, the technical team that supports all applications at HMH was looking to standardize on the platform and streamline so that their competency could be focused on technical support of a PeopleSoft ecosystem. The need for remote access didn't just lie with using expenses to create your expense reports and take a picture of a receipt, but also on the approval side. So once we were planning to roll out a formal approach to allowing remote access via your phone or mobile device, we needed to also consider migrating all approvals, and there were several approvals that Hackensack had implemented, migrating all of those onto the Fluid platform. When we did that, we knew there was going to be an influx of users that wanted to do those approvals on their phones. And so we needed to be ready for that. So workflow across all channels, HCM, financials, everything, all tidied up into one approval icon, one approval tile on the PeopleSoft My Way homepage. Paperless. Part of the legacy system was I guess you could call Microsoft Excel paperless, but there was still printing and routing for approvals and scanning of receipts and attaching these to embedded Excel spreadsheets. The goal was really to have everything electronically captured at the point of the transaction. Again, using your phone to capture the image of the receipts. All the while, the goal was to enhance internal controls, in particular, pre-travel authorizations, making sure that travel, when it included things like airfare and hotel and car rental, required a travel authorization before you could execute an expense report on that type of travel. And so all of these were issues and concerns that Hackensack needed to deploy, and we looked at the PeopleSoft expenses module as our solution. One thing we learned, on the HCM side, Fluid had been around for a while, and the core, the casual users that logged onto PeopleSoft occasionally had no problem with the Fluid user interface. But as I mentioned on the financial side, the core financials users were used to their navigation with breadcrumbs and standard navigation on the left side, weren't really looking for a Fluid solution to be forced upon them. And so in our case, because we were going to be expanding, because we're the user base that is for financials into the majority of the users within the organization who would have expense reports, and because we were going to be expanding the Fluid approval as the centralized approval location for all workflow, we decided that a benevolent dictatorship push was the best approach to change management, and that was get over it. The breadcrumbs are gone. We're going to move forward. We provided plenty of training and plenty of options for navigation, including the tile itself as a direct link, a tile to training, navigation collections that simplified the menu options for users, and even customizing the nav bar within tiles within the navigation collection or the nav bar. These were all fine solutions. It turns out the uproar diminished quickly. We had executive leadership and a strong push from them that this was happening. And so in this particular instance, change management was simply a mandate, and get used to the system, some training, and users rarely complained that their breadcrumbs were gone at the end of this. But do pay attention to your users when you make a wholesale change to the Fluid product. I suspect many of you on PeopleSoft have already done that by now. The demand for remote access, if you think of users at a healthcare organization, many are healthcare providers. Many are actually traveling healthcare providers, traveling nurses, and they needed to be able to access the system from outside the firewalls without having to do all of the extra things that you would do for full system access through a Citrix, perhaps, connection or something similar. They needed to get to PeopleSoft on their phone. It's as simple as that. And these are users that would be using the system now many times a day, not just once a day, not just once a week, but many times a day. Even users within the healthcare system in the firewall wanted to be able to access PeopleSoft from their phone without connecting to the network on their phone and logging on with their single sign-on password. So we needed to do all of this without compromising any level of security or control. I will say we went down the path along with Hackensack, thinking that we could invoke two-factor authentication without the support of at the time it was Appsian, PathLock, and their security platform for a period of time. For 3 months, we struggled with doing that. 3 months, we failed. We finally convinced our customer, Hackensack, that our business partner over at I want to say Appsian at PathLock was the right solution. We got them talking. Within 1 week, we had a signed contract between Hackensack and PathLock. We were able to do a proof of concept within a day, showing them that the multi-factor authentication tool set that HMH had adopted was Duo, that was enabled through the PathLock security platform. And within a week, we had the prototype running on their environment. And within a month, we were able to deploy it without incident across the board. I need to point out how quickly this happened. We never in our wildest dreams did we think that we would be able to do it without putting the project in jeopardy. We were testing within a week, and we were ready to go live on the PathLock and Duo solution before full user acceptance testing was complete. It saved our project. It truly saved our project. And remember, this was enabled not just for the mobile expenses. This was the driver, but now we had mobile HR that was accessible, right? So all of the employee self-service functions that are enabled there, plus a streamlined approval all in one location that users could do from their phone. And remember the timing of this. This occurred right before the pandemic when everyone moved to a remote worker. We didn't know at the time that that was about to happen, but we were enabled and ready to go. And without that, I can't imagine how difficult life could have been for employees outside of the system. So I'll stress it one more time. This was the fastest implementation I've been a part of with a PeopleSoft solution, getting access to the outside world. One of the things, and it's not on these slides, that we also invoked was because the security platform understands where you're connecting from, whether you're inside or outside the firewall. I do have some screenshots of those setup pages. We can change the security profile and allow certain activity. So for example, if you are logged on to PeopleSoft inside the firewall, no two-factor authentication is needed. Totally understand, single sign-on, you're in, you can do anything because you're within the HMH domain. If you access PeopleSoft from outside the domain, certain functions are disabled. Printing, for example, disabled. And if you think of a healthcare organization, it's completely understandable that if I'm not physically inside the firewall, I can't physically walk over to a printer and pick up what was printed. There's going to be a potential that there's sensitive information, patient information on that item that was being printed. Completely disabled, we have no risk of anything, any of that information lying around on a printer waiting for someone to see, because that entire functionality was disabled. Several other aspects of PeopleSoft that we knew wouldn't be done outside the firewall, that would only be done by folks that were logged in either via Citrix or within the firewall. We were able to disable those. And so when you access PeopleSoft through the security platform, the PathLock security platform, your menu options are clean, and the activities that you would be expecting to do are there, and only those activities are there. All right, it was a fantastic win for everyone. I've got a few screenshots, and hilariously, under here we've hidden a tile that I wanted to show you. We've got the approvals tile. This particular approver just didn't have anything to approve. On the tile hidden here under leader self-service was the leader's ability to go into some financials activities and see what's going on. If Gary was here, he could have logged on and shown you that when we try to connect from outside the firewall using our phone, we are invoked with a two-factor authentication. Okay, how do you want to verify it's you? Send me a push, call me, or enter a passcode. Obviously, the setup that happens, each user is associated with the Duo account. The Duo account understands your mobile device. It's going to be sending you a authentication to your mobile device, calling you, or if you have a password generator, you can enter your password as well. Okay, it's as simple as that. Literally within 1 week, prototype, within a month, full testing, and we deployed within weeks after that. Everyone in the organization was able to access the system. There were very few user calls coming in, and most of them were because they hadn't yet set up and activated their Duo account. Once they had done that, there were almost no calls coming in to the help desk asking how they get connected on the mobile device. Further, nobody seemed to complain that some of their security access was disabled when accessing via their phone. So I think that means we got everything right. Anyhow, this is what they're presented with. Once they get there, they're in. Here's some setup pages. I'm not the setup expert. If you have any questions and you type them in the questions box or the chat, we do have Greg Wendt out there listening in. If any technical questions come up, I will direct them to him. But this is where you go to set up your logging capability. So this is another thing that was turned on. Is anytime a user logged in, and it was remote, we logged it. Anytime they wanted to access certain specific sensitive data, such as display a bank account code or their social security number or any other highly sensitive, we logged that. In fact, if you wanted to change your bank account, we turned on a requirement for two-factor authentication, even though you've already authenticated to be in PeopleSoft, because that is so highly sensitive. We required a second two-factor authentication, and that was true whether you were inside the firewall or outside the firewall. So all of these logging and two-factor authentication invokes that we set up were all based on what were perceived to be current weaknesses in our internal control structure. Okay, so this is where you set up and trigger to Duo. So we do a two-factor challenge every time we are accessing the system outside the firewall or anytime we are changing something like a bank account. I think actually the bank account is the only one that we set it to for inside the firewall. Everything outside the firewall required you to authenticate via Duo. Okay. Now, one of the things that we were able to do because of the security platform that PathLock provided, the internal information security InfoSec team at Hackensack analyzed the security and found it to be so strong that they allowed location services to be turned on when using PeopleSoft expenses. This was important. This was very important because one of the key functions that was desired for your travelers, for the HMH travelers, was to be able to use Google Maps and the Google functionality to track your mileage. incredibly functional for the traveling nurses and those that literally travel as a part of their job day in and day out. We, by the way, looked into Oracle Maps originally. It was just not going to provide the solution that we were looking for. Hackensack has become a Google organization, migrating away from Microsoft Office products and onto Google products. And so like their PeopleSoft first push, Google first is the doctrine at Hackensack Meridian Health for any type of system such as mileage. And so we tweaked the delivered mileage functionality, had to do some customizations, but we were able to enable location services. This particular screenshot is from a PC, not from a phone. But as you can imagine, when you connect, when you go to the PeopleSoft expenses module, you're literally logged into PeopleSoft from your phone. Once you're there, because we have location services enabled due to the security from PathLock, we're able to click our starting and ending points as the actual point that we are in our vehicle, and it can track the actual miles driven from point A to point B. And if you're a traveling nurse, that might be 6 different stops throughout the day. So it tracks each time, and I no longer have to type addresses. I no longer have to remember where it was that I went. If I forgot to enter it in at the beginning, I just use my phone to track my location, and then I stop tracking at the end of the trip. And then we click the calculate GPS distance button, service out to Google, back it comes. Here's our reimbursable miles, and then the exchange rate, whatever that happens to be, is my mileage reimbursement for that particular day or for that particular trip. So super important for you to understand that location services couldn't have been turned on had it not been for the security platform that PathLock provided. Not just security access and multi-factor, but the security overall that we were able to get. All right, let's see. I don't think I have many more slides here. I mentioned that we didn't get a lot of calls. We did do a lot of recorded trainings, and this was put out in the My Way site so HMH, as you can see up here, HMH expenses was a link that was on the HMH My Way, the employee self-service page. And there we had a tile for learning. And each of these was in this time, we built these using Adobe Captivate. So these are MP4 recordings of how to do your transactions, playable and resident right from your phone or your desktop. Had Oracle Guided Learning been around at the time, we might have explored using that. And if you're interested in Oracle Guided Learning, I know this is a shameless plug, but Spear MC is the author and only reseller of Oracle Guided Learning for the PeopleSoft product. But what we did at Hackensack, we created recorded videos of the actual how-to transactions for every type of activity that would come up. In this case, for mobile homepage, so that users would have access to those, whether they were inside the firewall or out. And I believe, Stephanie, that may be the final slide in my presentation, and I am ready and willing to take questions at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Randy. We have a few questions. Our first question is, were there any considerations for MFA such as PeopleSoft native password users, system administrators, and how were students handled? Would you like to take that, Randy or Greg?
I wish Gary was here because we didn't deploy, we actually hadn't deployed Campus Solutions at the time we rolled out the HCM and financial. Greg, do you happen to know, I'm putting you on the spot, do you know if they called up and added campus to the security platform?
I would have to look. I don't want to tell something that didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know.
So what I know is the plan was to roll it out to students, and every student would use Duo. I can also tell you that we are currently in the process of deploying the supplier portal. And through the supplier portal, we are going to, so there's two PeopleSoft supplier portals. There's a public portal where you go and you register to become a supplier or a bidder. And then there's the secure portal where if you are an approved supplier, you can be provided a PeopleSoft logon ID for things like responding to an RFP or looking up the current state of my invoices or and so forth. And the plan is that we will use the security platform with PathLock and Duo, and require even suppliers to use Duo two-factor authentication when logging in. And I'm not sure if that answered your question or not. We didn't look at other MFA tools other than Duo. Duo was already licensed at HMH. So I'm going to ask you to reply to your question. Let me know if that answered it or if you need further information.
And we can also have some representatives reach out and clarify that question a little bit
Perfect.
more.
Great.
Our next question is, does MFA support YubiKey tokens? Sorry, I'm not sure if I said that right. YubiKey tokens?
Tokens, yeah. So I'm not sure about Duo, but I do know that they do. So these would be those random password generators every, I think, 60 seconds, right? I believe that's the question that's being asked. And there is an ability to do that. If you remember on my slide here, enter a passcode is one of the options. And when you click this one, this is where you're provided with a random generated passcode using an easy key, or secure ID is one of the options as well. And so that would be a part of your profile, similar to your mobile number for receiving a call or a push.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have today. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and thank Randy at Spear MC for presenting today.